Well, Publisher gives you full control over the content in any kind of publication you may want to create. You can get a great head start by using the templates, and there's so many to choose from. Now, when you choose templates, for example, this brochure that we're working on from the previous lesson, you'll notice that you've got sections or areas in your publication where certain pieces of information should go. For example, you might want graphics showing up in a certain section. Then you may have these frames where text will appear. And that's what we're going to talk about in this lesson, is adding text to a frame. So when we use a template, we may have frames that should have text inside of them, and sometimes what you'll see is text inside a frame that is instructions about how to get that text in there. So what we're going to do is actually go to the Open button here. We'll click Open, navigate to the Lesson 3 folder of your exercise files, and let's all get together here with Brochure 3B. Give that one a click, and then Open. So here's our brochure, and you can see some of the information's already here on our back panel. And then over here we've got on the front panel some graphics and some text. Down below you can see we've got 2 pages. There's 2 sides to this brochure. Clicking on 2 will take us to page 2. And you can see that these areas in our brochure already have lots of text in them, but if we were to zoom in using the techniques we learned in the previous lesson, you can see that this text is really just filler. In other words, it's there to show you what it's going to look like once you add your own text. Look at the About Us section here. The most important information is included here on the inside panels. Use these panels to introduce your organization and describe specific products or services. So this is information, this is text, but it's also instructions. This text should be brief and should entice the reader to want to know more about the product or the service. You can use secondary headings to organize your text to make it more scannable for the reader. And then we get into that filler text down below. So when you choose templates, make sure you check out what's inside these text frames before you start adding text, because you might get some helpful hints. So now we're going to go up to File and click New. And let's say we want to create a new newsletter. So we'll come down to Newsletters, give that a click. And then we'll just choose a template or a layout here, kind of like this one called Bounce. So give that a click. And then we'll just click Create, accepting the defaults for the color schemes and the font schemes. So here's a newsletter. Now we're zoomed out to 42%. To see this actual text in these various frames, we need to zoom in. And up here you can see Newsletter Title. So to add text to this frame, we just click inside the frame, and the frame you can see is surrounded by these dashes. So when I click inside here, I have a flashing cursor inside the frame, and I'm just going to scroll up a little bit so you can see that there are handles around the outside of the selected frame. Now, if I wanted to, I could click and drag over this text, and watch what happens. It's all highlighted so I can type over it like it's not even there. So for example, if I was using the Eat Cake Patisserie scenario, that's what I might type here. And it's going to move around inside that frame depending on this particular publication, which is a newsletter, so it shows up in the ideal spot. I can move this, I can edit that text, I can change its alignment. We're going to talk about all those things a little bit later. Right now we'll just accept the default, and we'll click outside the selected frame now to see the end result. Now if I just zoom in a little bit further here, down below you can see some of the business information that's showing up in these text boxes by default. Down below it says Lead Story Headline. So here's an example where I've got some text which is really just instructions. So as I zoom in, I can read those instructions. Lead Story Headline. This story can fit 175 to 225 words. You can see the purpose of a newsletter is to blah, blah, blah. First, determine the audience. So all of this text that's in there is sample text, but it's also instructions about how I should be inserting the text here. So for the headline right here, for example, I can click and drag over that, type right over it like I did for my title. Lead Story Headline, Eat Cake Patisserie opens 10 new stores. And I'm going to capitalize the N in new just to be consistent. Alright, so now I click down here, and look what happens when I click down below in the content area. All of that text, which is instructions, is selected for me. I didn't have to highlight it. I just simply have to start typing. Now, of course, if I have this text somewhere else, like in a Microsoft Word document or in some other document, I definitely can copy that text and paste it in here. I've got all of those buttons for cutting and copying and pasting as well in Publisher. But typically what you're going to do is just simply start typing. And as you do, the highlighted text disappears. And of course, I'm not going to fill all of this text while you're watching. You get the idea. And you can see how it's wrapping around within the column sections in these various text frames so that everything's always going to stay lined up. So when I'm done, I click outside the selected area to deselect and see the finished product. That's as easy as it gets. You simply click inside a text frame, you start typing. If it's a title, you may have to highlight that text and type over it. If it's content, sometimes that will be instructions, sometimes it'll be filler text, but when you click inside the area, it's highlighted for you or selected, so you can simply start typing right over what's there and insert your own content. Keep in mind, too, if you've already got the content, use copy and paste.